Yeah, welcome to the last talk today. For me in Germany, it's 8 p.m. It's dark outside, so I hope you're not too tired if you're from Germany. But also a warm welcome to the international attendees here. I'm fully aware that the title of my talk is quite buzzwordy, isn't it? Domain-driven design, DevOps, and the buzzword bingo kicks off. But nevertheless, I think there are quite a few things where the two approaches, the two ideas have quite a bit of stuff in common. And I very often see that this is not being mentioned explicitly in many talks and blog posts and so on. And that's why I thought it may be a good idea to put some highlight on these things. Allow me to introduce myself briefly. I'm Michael Ploed. I work as a fellow at InnoQ. I'm mostly busy in the consulting business. Focus is software architecture and quite a bit of domain-driven design stuff. And I'm also a regular speaker at various conferences and do quite a few trainings. And that's basically it about me. And I want to kick this talk off with a quote from the Agile manifesto. Yeah, we're in the Agile track here. And I would say that both ideas, domain-driven design and DevOps, heavily stem from ideas from the Agile community. And a very popular quote from the Agile manifesto is that our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of software. So, surprise, surprise, we want to satisfy our customers. Yeah, that's the first thing. How do we satisfy our customers? I think by probably understanding their needs. That's something we will talk about today. Then we want to deliver software early and in a continuous fashion. How do we do that? Things we will talk about in this talk. Or let's take a look at that from a different perspective. The next question is, how can we maximize the value exchange with our customer in a continuous fashion at a high velocity? Yeah. So if we look at this slide, yeah, we see customers and they pay money for our software, our products, or our products which are software. And why are they doing that? Why should they pay money for the stuff that we build? Hopefully, because we provide them with a value in exchange for that. Yeah, so when you're someone who loves to bike and to run, and you use something like Strava, Strava offers you a certain value for that. Yeah, and we need to identify that value. Yeah, and this should happen in a continuous fashion. Now, if I look at the DevOps world, for instance, yeah, I see quite a few things out there. On the one hand, if I look at quite a few DevOps conferences, and I like doing that talk or similar talk sometimes at DevOps conferences, and I run around at the conferences, I see a lot of technology right there. Yeah, Nginx, Rancher, Kubernetes, service meshes, whatever, tons of technology. I don't see a lot of cultural discussions at some DevOps conferences, at least. And if I boil down DevOps to a slogan, yeah, I very often hear, you built it and you run it. Yeah, that's like, it comes from the early heydays of the DevOps movement. And I have a lot of respect for this movement and the ideas behind it. I think there are very good ideas in there. But to be honest, I struggle sometimes a little bit with that slogan. You built it, you run it. Why? Let's dig into that for a little bit. There's a very interesting infographic that has been published by the amazing folks at Amplitude. And what they came up with is like a graph, yeah, that shows like a journey to product to team, yeah, infographic is this, yeah. So on the one hand, you have certain team boundaries, yeah, that's the yellow stuff, yeah. Then you have some external teams, some external handoffs that are happening there, and also some internal handoffs, yeah, and some areas with cross-functional collaboration. So if we take this term, you built it, you run it seriously, yeah, we would be somewhere probably in the agile release silo, but we would probably pull the run part more to the right side in that graphic. Yeah, I assume, yeah, that most of the DevOps folks, yeah, would start seeing themselves in this space down there, as it's stated in that infographic. DevOps design, development, collaboration. Yeah. However, yeah, the design part is already not part of that slogan. You build it, you run it. I know quite a few DevOps folks see it here, and rightfully so. And if we want to go ahead and take this infographic and move it in the agile space towards the lean movement, yeah, the lean ideas, which have been heavily coined by the amazing books by Eric Ries, for instance, like the Lean Startup, yeah, with their build, measure, learn cycles. Yeah, what we would see here is a strong focus that there is some areas where we learn stuff, other areas where we build stuff, and other areas where we can measure for, I would say, metrics, business metrics, and get data for learning things. Now, what I would say, and now let me ask you a question, or I'll bring a statement up. Why I think that this you built it, you run it is sometimes, or this perception of you build stuff and you run it is sometimes a little bit difficult, is a quote which has been coined by Alberto Brandolini. Alberto is a very popular guy in the domain-driven design community. He's the inventor of a method called event storming, which I will highlight in this talk as well. And Alberto once said a very wise sentence. He said, it's not the domain expert's knowledge that goes into productions. It's the assumptions of the developers that goes into production. What does that mean? It basically means that we run an inherent risk that we think we have a shared understanding of stuff that we should deploy to production, that we should implement in code. But we run a very high risk that there may be quite a few misconceptions, misunderstandings, false assumptions, and so on. So, and this is basically the part where I think domain-driven design comes a little bit into play, because I think a plane, you build it, you run it, is not enough. Because when you build stuff based on the wrong assumptions, you can do as much collaboration as you want on the operating side, yeah, but you will still produce lackluster results. And I think that's a reason why we need a little bit more than just DevOps. And I think in the mindset of most people in the DevOps community, this is crystal clear. Yeah, but I want to, with this talk, on the one hand, I want to create an awareness for that. Yeah, that it's not just about hacking code and putting it into production and being in an on-call service and being involved in operational things. Great stuff. Yeah, no disrespect here. But I think that us as architects and developers should be even involved ways earlier on. Yeah. And I think the domain-driven design world can give us quite a few good ideas and methods, tools, and also cultural aspects that blend perfectly into this world. And one thing that I want to introduce you to is the so-called domain-driven design starter modeling process. Now, what is that? Basically, domain-driven design is very old. The blue book by Eric Evans, it's this one here. Wait a minute. I've got it right there. That's this one. The blue book by Eric Evans, the original domain-driven design book, which I'm holding into the camera right now. This is now, I would say, roughly 19, if not even 20 years old. I'm talking about a really old book. There are many great ideas in that book, but us as a community, and I would consider myself to be a somewhat active member of the DDD community, and we are not sleeping. Yeah, so there is a lot of activity, and one of the activities that happened was when COVID started off in 2020. Quite a few folks got together and created a GitHub organization called DDD-Crew. Yeah, you can see the link on the slide below. And under that umbrella, we are publishing tons of content in under a Creative Commons license. So basically open source kind of content. And one thing in there is the domain-driven design starter modeling process. And I want to guide you through some things here, yeah, which have a correlation to the DevOps idea, yeah, and but I would highly recommend you to take a look at these resources on your own, yeah. So one of the first steps that we should do in order to avoid that we build stuff up on wrong assumptions is that we should understand the business model of the products and the software that we are going to build. Now, you may think, hey, listen, I'm a developer, I'm an architect or whatever. It's not my job to design a business model. Yes, you're right. That's definitely not your job. Yeah. But I think, at least as an architect, I would say it is your job to understand the business model of the thing which you're building, to understand that. And one tool that you could use there is, let's say, work together with some stakeholders on a so-called business model canvas. Yeah, those canvas techniques, they can help you to ask some questions. So for instance, what's the value proposition of the software, of the product that I'm actually building? Why does it exist? Please remember this value exchange here. So basically, why would people pay, or why should people pay money, yeah, for the stuff that we are building? Why does it exist? Why is someone funding this software, is paying for it? The other, who is the customer segment? Is it hardcore users? Is it the common public? Is it technical folks? Are those specialists in a certain area of expertise like medicine, insurance, financial services, or whatever? Yeah. What are the channels that we're going to interact with our customers? What's the cost and revenue structure? I would say make sure you understand it, or that you see if maybe in some people's heads are different perspectives on this. Yeah, you're not supposed to build that. And one very essential thing, even for this already, and also for all of the next steps, is knowledge from domain experts in domain-driven design. So that's, in my eyes, a real essential thing. So you need access to knowledge from people who know stuff about that domain. Yeah, because together with them, we want to go ahead and do a discovery phase, yeah, where we understand, yeah, what is part of a domain, what is needed in here. And Melissa Perry had a really great quote in her awesome book, Escaping the Build Track. Or she said, when companies do not understand their customers or users' problems well, they cannot possibly define value for them. Instead of doing the work to learn this information about customers, they create a proxy that is easy to measure. Value becomes the quantity of features that are delivered, and as a result, the number of features shipped becomes the primary metric of success. Yeah, of course, we can ship tons of features, but if no one uses them, they are useless and they are a waste of money. And I think, therefore, we need to have a good understanding of our users' needs and so on, because if we just build features and run them, yeah, mind the built it and run it sentence, we run the risk of creating very little value. And I know that this is not in the mind of anyone from the DevOps camp. So in order to understand that, we need to take a look at various stakeholders. Yeah. We have a bunch of stakeholders in each project, in each product, who have an interest on that. The domain-driven design world, I'm now talking in the DDD world, is mostly focused on those three in the middle, and especially the two on the left and the right side, developers, architects, and business domain experts. So one thing that the DDD world says is that we need a really good shared understanding between those two parties to make sure that the stuff that we build creates value. And therefore, we need direct collaboration and direct communication. I mean, direct collaboration between developers and operations folks. Isn't that something that the DevOps folks are pitching all the time? I think there is quite a bit of a similarity. You may now think, hey, Michael, it's 8:15. That's obvious stuff. But I'm pretty sure there's some folks here listening to this talk who are around on Reddit or Twitter and so on, and who sometimes like to have a good laugh at a meme. Maybe you know the what could possibly go wrong memes. Yeah. Let's elaborate that with a very simple example. So let's take a look at that hotel room. Yeah. And let's take a look at how most folks would name these things in the hotel room. I would say there are a bunch of very obvious terms. You may still be a little bit confused. Yeah. Of course, that's called window. Of course, that's called TV. Of course, that's called a trolley, a painting, a desk, and a chair. Yeah. But what do we very often see in code? And let me be evil and sarcastic now. So I need my devil's horns for the next slide. Dear developers, please take that with a grain of sarcasm. But I think there is some truth to my sarcasm here. Let's guess we implement this hotel room in code. What do I see in quite a few of the code reviews and architecture reviews that I do? I see terms like transparency factory, decorator impl, entertainment provider singleton, work enablement device, rollable stuff container, or REST provider. I think, I know that I'm really evil now, but I think I have a point here. Yeah, I see quite a few of those names in code bases. Now, when we say we need a direct collaboration, how should that work when we even talk about different terms in code and in the domain language that the domain experts are talking? Now, what many organizations are doing here, they create an additional team, a requirements engineering team. Mind, yeah, this infographic here. An additional team means an additional external handoff, means more coordination. However, our goal is early and continuous delivery of software. We want to be fast in delivering these things. Now, when we go ahead and establish an additional team, we have more external handoffs. It takes more time. Yeah. This continuous gets stretched out and it can get slow. We can also say, we're not doing that. We're an agile company. We work with Scrum. Yeah, so we have product owners who do all that stuff. Fair enough, no disrespect. But does that really work, this model? I think it can work, yeah. Please don't get me wrong. I don't say we need to get rid of all product managers, product owners, or requirements engineers. That's not something I want to pitch here. I think it would actually be an utterly stupid idea. Yeah. But I think what we need in order to get this working is still a direct communication between developers and domain experts, so that the developers, we make sure that they have a thorough understanding of the user's needs and what needs to be built. Nevertheless, we have this language gap. And what the DDD folks pitch quite a bit is that we should establish a so-called ubiquitous language. It's a shared language that both parties speak. And this language is aimed at becoming a basis for a domain model. And I would want to see that language in architecture diagrams. For instance, when you work with the C4 model by Simon Brown, 4+1 model by Kruchten, or the ARC42 fuse for visualizing software architectures, yeah, I want to see that terminology in there. I also want to see that terminology in the documentation and even in code. Now, please be aware, this ubiquitous doesn't mean company-wide. Yeah? Yes, ubiquitous is ubiquitous, but ubiquitous is coined at these things like conversations, code, drawings, and so on, but within a clear boundary of things. We will talk about boundaries later on in this talk. What I mean with boundaries. So language is always context specific. So in one context, an account can be a bank account or a credit card account. In another context, account can mean a user account, for instance. Yeah, so, and within such a boundary, and we will get to know those boundaries later on in the talk, this language should be ubiquitous. I will get back to that. Now, one thing when we talk about discovering things in a domain, or a method that is very popular here, is event storming. Event storming is a so-called collaborative modeling technique. And it basically stems on using tons of sticky notes. Yeah? And you set up a workshop with your domain experts, with developers, with architects, with product people, maybe UX specialists, and so on. You get them in a room. You need a long free wall, or you use an online version with Miro or Mural or Concept Board or something like that. And you explore the domain by, first of all, writing down domain events and writing them on sticky notes. What is a domain event? It's one of the major concepts of an event storming workshop. Yeah, and it always contains a verb in past tense. Yeah, you can see that on the slide here. So we have, for instance, final automated scoring triggered, loan granted, loan not granted, signed contract answered, contract repudiation given, manual validation finished, property evaluated, repayment plan calculated. Yeah, so those are things that happen in a domain. Yeah, and you just put them on the wall. You don't take care a lot. You don't invest a lot of thought in the ordering, because that's something that you do in the next step. You then, as a group, sort those domain events, and you first of all start having meaningful conversations in the big group. Yeah. So how's that sorting? Ah, okay, that's your perspective on that. That's interesting. I thought that this is a very complex thing. Isn't that complex? Or, oh, I thought that's a super easy thing, but wow, there's a lot of complexity hidden in there. I always had the guess that we do that manually, but you wanted that to be automated. Now I understand why you complain, for instance. So it's also a means to ignite meaningful conversations in a domain. And as a next step, we as a group then try to identify pivotal events. Those are very important ones. Yeah. So let's say you go to the website of a car manufacturer. Let's say you go to the website of Audi, BMW, Porsche, Tesla, let's not use Tesla here because the example doesn't fit, Volkswagen or wherever, Renault, yeah, and you configure your dream car, whatever that may be, yeah. You add a color, you add some tires, you add an infotainment system, some assistance systems, and so on. That's all nice stuff. Is there value being generated? No, probably not yet. Now, the car makers that I mentioned usually go ahead and have you can store your configuration and you get a configuration number. Yeah, so let's say 8 digits or something like that. And you can now take that configuration number and go to the car dealership and tell the salesperson at the car dealership and say, hey, I would like to get that car. I would say the event configuration number shown at car dealership is a really important one. Yeah, that's a substance because the responsibility changes from the online configuration to the dealership. The chance to really earn money for the company has risen. Yeah? So the person has invested time and effort to get to the dealership and say, hey, I would like to have that thing. So the chance that you make a deal on the car is very high. So maybe that's a candidate for a pivotal event. Yeah, or you fill out a mortgage loan application. Yeah, calculate some interest rates and financing options and so on. You can do that as much as you want. Pivotal is when you submit an application to the bank. That has a lot of substance. So basically, the aim for the event storming stuff is to really get a shared understanding of these things in a direct collaborative fashion. And I would say this collaborative fashion has quite a few similarities to the collaborative fashion that we talk about in the DevOps world between ops folks and development folks. Yeah, basically, we want these things to blend. But we can even go further with that, because based on that, we can start decomposing a domain. Now, so we can define boundaries based on that. And there is an idea in the DDD world called the bounded context. I will come to that in a few minutes. But I would say from a DevOps perspective, there are quite a few interesting things here. So on the one hand, on the operating part, so let's assume you do microservices. How do you cut your microservices? How do you design them? How do you design boundaries for your microservices? So that's one thing, yeah. But also, DevOps is a highly organizational thing as well, yeah. We want to have cross-functional teams that implement stuff and that run that stuff in production. Now, what are the boundaries for those teams? What are the team boundaries here? Robert Frost had a really great quote saying, good fences make good neighbors. I mean, what do we want to do? We want to continuously deliver software to production in order to create value. How can we continuously deliver valuable software to production? By reducing cross-team coordination. Because when we have a high need for team coordination, yeah, between teams, this term continuous may get some really interesting interpretations. Yeah, you can say once a year is continuous as well, but I don't think that this is early. Yeah, so we need boundaries for that so that this idea works. Another interesting idea is also written in the amazing book Drive by Daniel H. Pink, called where he did some research on, what motivates teams, what motivates people, and he came to the conclusion that it's, to a certain degree, of course, financial things and perks and whatever, but the real key motivators are autonomy, mastery, and purpose. I'll get back to all those terms in a few minutes, but what we need are, especially also in a DevOps world, that those ideas come to fruition, are good boundaries in which teams can achieve autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and that those boundaries are really good, solid, and suitable fences. Yeah. Now, the thing is, how do we cut those boundaries? Because we have many choices to group domain concepts. Which boundaries do we choose? Take a look at this image here on that slide. What can be potential ways to group those concerns? Maybe color. Yeah. So we have gray, white, yellow, green. Yeah. Maybe the text, A, B, C, D, A, X, no text. Maybe the size of the shapes, yeah, or the shapes themselves. What's the right thing here? George E.P. Box once said, all models are wrong, some of them are useful. So our task should be to identify the useful ones here, and an heuristic, and you could use in the DDD space, are boundaries between those pivotal events. Yeah, the heuristic says that probably with a very high likelihood, those pivotal events are interesting candidates, and they are with a high likelihood sitting on the boundaries of certain modules. And you can also look into the swim lanes. And a concept in the DDD space, which very much plays also into those ideas here, yeah, that boundaries in which teams can achieve autonomy, mastery, and purpose, is the bounded context. Yeah, so a definition for the bounded context is that it's a boundary for a model expressed in a consistent language and tailored around a specific need. I know this definition right here is quite abstract, so let's dig into this a little bit. So first of all, this is a boundary, yeah? And within this boundary, I want to make sure that a team which is doing DevOps can master and learn the domain complexity, that they are not overloaded in terms of cognitive load, that they can conduct experiments and continuously learn about the needs of their users, yeah, so that we can get into that value exchange. And they should obviously be able to deliver a high value software. Now, the bounded context is the boundary for a model. In a DDD perspective, the model mainly is highly driven by business rules, decisions, policies. This model is expressed in a consistent language. What does that mean? Remember the ubiquitous language thing, which I mentioned before. Yeah? Language consists of terminology, definitions, the meaning of things. And this is very important. We want to tailor all these things, language, rules, the specific model, to a certain purpose. Yeah? So we don't want to create general purpose models that can do basically everything, but in the end, nothing really well. No, we want to create models that do certain things really well. Now, let me give you a quick example for that, especially for this language part again, because this is very important to the DDD world. Let me ask you a question. What is a tomato? And that's a very popular example in the domain-driven design world. So maybe some of you have already heard that. maybe you want to answer me in the chat. What's a tomato, a fruit or a vegetable? What do you think? Sasha says vegetable. Other opinions? So Sasha, I am sorry, I need to disappoint you. In botanics, Keto wrote fruit. Yeah. Yeah. So botanics say, the science in botanics says that tomato is a fruit. So keto is right. But let's say you order a fruit salad in a restaurant. I would say you wouldn't expect a tomato in there. But you would expect a tomato in a ratatouille dish, a French vegetable dish, a really good one, simple but awesome dish. Tomatoes are a key ingredient in this vegetable dish. So I would say in the context of cooking, tomato is being treated as a vegetable. Yeah. Another thing, back in the days, there were import taxes in the US on vegetables. What happened? Everyone was importing tomatoes to the US. Until the US customs said, hey, we don't care what the botanic science says. We define a tomato as a vegetable. Now, in this context, mind context, tomato is also a vegetable. I have another example. Maybe some of you, Keto just, Sasha says, there are more cooks than botanics. That's probably true, but nevertheless, yeah. Maybe a smaller context than Sasha. Keto had an awesome talk about getting things done. Yeah, good stuff. Highly recommend that. Another thing, yeah, if you're moving in that area and look at time management techniques, maybe some of you know the time management technique Pomodoro. What does the tomato timer represent there? A unit of 25 minutes of high concentration, uninterrupted work. If you go back to the medieval ages, where theater plays were done on marketplaces, what was the tomato there in this context? The tomato which was flying to the stage. It was negative feedback. Now, you may think, why is he talking about tomatoes in this talk? We're talking about DevOps and DDD. I think there is an interesting takeaway here. The bounded context in domain-driven design is not about implementing a botanics US customs cooking time management feedback tomato. No, we don't want to squeeze all these things. Thanks, Keto. We need to catch up at another conference soon. I haven't seen you in ages. The tomato aims, the bounded context aims at specific models which are tied to a specific purpose. Yeah, we want to be explicit so that the teams can make independent decisions. Sasha raised an interesting question in the chat. He said, "What? Why not? It's like building a centralistic tomato system." Yes, you can do that. But on a centralistic tomato system, you probably have a lot of external handoffs for the team, a lot of external coordination. And when this thing grows, will we be able to deliver value and software early and continuously? I doubt that. Yeah. So this will get bogged down probably to 3 releases a year. Yeah. Something I think that's not in the sense of stuff why we do DevOps and stuff like that. Yeah. Another thing is now again drawing parallels to the DevOps. I'm drawing on quite a few strings now. I'm aware of that. The next thing here is, in order for DevOps to be really successful, we need to have clear-cut team boundaries and clear-cut team responsibilities so that we can bring all these ideas to fruition in production, in the day-to-day work. And there is a new book out there. It's a 3-year-old book now, called Team Topologies by Matthew Skelton and Manuel Pace. And this is a book which is highly popular in the DDD community and also in other communities. I know that quite a few folks at Agile architecture conferences are talking about that. And what they also said in that book, that the bounded context can also be a team first boundary. So this is not just a software modeling kind of thing. It is in the first place, but you can draw that idea further. Yeah, because when we model those bounded contexts, we should make sure if the cognitive load for the teams who are doing DevOps is right. Yeah, can they do their job properly? Yeah, is the complexity handleable in a way, yeah, that the team can master and learn the domain complexity, that they can have the time, have the capabilities to run experiments in order to continuously, yeah, refine the value which they provide to other teams. Yeah. So I think there are many, many good ideas here. Yeah. And I'm just scratching the surface in 50 minutes. Yeah. Now, another thing that is very important, yeah, we want to continuously deliver software and value. Yeah. Continuously also means that we need a foundation, an architecture which can evolve over time. Yeah. Now, if we look at typical innovation cycles, yeah, we have teams that take a look at the market. Hey, what's going on there? Yeah. And the market over time expects a better and better user experience. Yeah. You always have some companies who are pushing the boundaries in terms of UX, who are spoiling the customers. Take a look at the changes in the e-commerce market for food, yeah, for supermarkets. Yeah, there were offerings where you were able to reserve a time slot, let's say in 3 days between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. in the afternoon, and you got your food delivered in that time slot. Now, suddenly, there are players on the market that say, well, you don't need to reserve a time slot, just order and we deliver in 10 minutes. I live in Nuremberg in Germany, and I have one of those offerings in my neighborhood, and it really works. So when I start cooking and I realize, oh, I need a bunch of stuff in order to do the dish, I order online, and in 10 minutes it rings on my doorbell and the food gets delivered to me. Yeah. Now, a big enabler for that is software, which is again being built by the teams. Now, we need a foundation. So for an evolving architecture, and a great guy from the Agile community, I assume that that quite a few folks of you have heard about him, is Alan Holub. Yeah? Alan said the key to incremental architecture is to build on a framework that can accommodate change. That framework is the domain. By modeling the domain, you can more easily handle changes to the domain. So basically what Alan says is, yeah, you should model the software according to the business domain. Sasha, I will answer your question in 5 minutes, okay? I've read it. Now, another thing that comes into play here is the team part. Yeah, I think for DevOps to be really successful, yeah, and that's something that also was described in the amazing Accelerate book by Nicole Forsgren, Jess Humble, and Gene Kim. Yeah, they said that a key driver for continuous delivery performance, which is a key aspect in a DevOps world, yeah, is having a loosely coupled software architecture and an organizational structure that matches that. So basically, when we take that quote and transform it to those innovation cycles, yeah, we should also have an alignment between the boundaries in the software and the domain and the teams. So when I'm pulling again some strings here, yeah, it's going to be the teams that shape your product. Yeah? So on the one hand, we have a very strong focus, yeah, on the DDD part with modeling software along a business domain, yeah, and quite a few ideas from the team topologies world. So where we say, okay, those are the teams we need and the architecture that we want. We don't have time to dig very deeply into the team topology stuff. I'm just drawing some parallels here, but nevertheless, the DDD world helps you to find good boundaries for those teams. Yeah. And this is where a question from Sasha, I think, really fits in nicely. He wrote it in the chat. Could you have a word about the standing of platform teams in such a world where a team would do most of the things by their own? Yeah, so basically the team topologies folks, they talk about 4 types of teams: platform teams, stream-aligned teams, enabling teams, and complex subsystem teams. I would say that a high degree of the teams who are using DevOps for creating value to customers are stream-aligned teams. However, you have platform teams who are offering services in a self-service manner in order to reduce the cognitive load of those stream-aligned teams. Yeah, so basically the platform teams are working as an internal product teams, and their customers are mostly those stream-aligned teams. So I think platform teams are of a key importance here. Yeah, and those can be continuous delivery, CI/CD, DevOps platforms. Yeah, so platforms based on which those other teams, those stream-aligned teams, can live this, you build it, you run it. Yeah, because you wouldn't want to do DevOps on an IBM WebSphere installation running on a virtualized machine or something like that. It would kill the cognitive load for the teams, because this is too complex. Yeah, and I think this is where the platform teams come into play. Yeah, I hope I was able to answer your question and address your question, Sasha. Yeah? So let me wrap this talk up with a brief summary here. So when we go ahead and add those 2 stakeholders overall together, we have collaboration ideas in the DDD world between developers and architects. DDD also gives us great ideas for shaping team boundaries and deployment unit boundaries, which have a relevance to the DevOps world. However, from a collaboration perspective, the DevOps world says, hey, you should go ahead and collaborate closely, have a close collaboration between operational knowledge and development knowledge. And I think, and now the buzzword bingo is going to explode at the end of the day today, when we combine DevOps and DDD together, we can put this you built it, you run it idea to a whole new level, because I think we get the you design it, you built it, you run it. Isn't that the key idea of a cross-functional team in the Agile world? I think it is. All right. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope I was able to give you some new insights. So if you're interested in these things, I will post those slides on my speaker deck account. I'll tweet about that probably tomorrow in the morning, because I'll get away from the computer quite fast after that talk. You can follow me on Twitter. You can hook up with me on LinkedIn. And yeah, if you're interested in trainings, consulting around these things, you may contact me at any time.